The movie opens with three friends named Anshul, Chaka and Taran stuck in traffic. It's evident that the three have been waiting for a very long time. Now frustrated, Anshul and Chaka begin complaining about their city and how it's almost impossible to get anywhere on time. Thankfully, the jam clears out soon and the three end up driving straight to a nearby bar. There, they stare at all the gorgeous girls and imagine having a love life of their own. While chatting, Anshul and Taran make fun of Chaka for never having been in a relationship. The latter tries to defend himself, but somehow this just makes matters worse. His friends tease him relentlessly for a while until he finally gives up. These three bachelors, who are not only flatmates but also best friends, intend to spend their life to the fullest and always support each other through various ups and downs. Moving forward, the topic quickly shifts from girls to education and career. Anshul instantly takes this opportunity to tell his friends that he has finally gotten a decent promotion at work. Hearing this, his friends happily congratulate him and decide to celebrate this amazing news. Within moments, all three of them head off to a club and proceed to enjoy themselves to the fullest. They drink a lot of beer and dance the entire night away. After a really wild night, the three guys wake up and get ready for their day. Anshul and Taran go to an event whereas Chaka leaves for a wedding. Just as the two boys are enjoying themselves, Anshul takes notice of a gorgeous girl dancing and having loads of fun. He instantly falls for her and walks over to introduce himself. He then starts flirting with her and hands his number over in order to connect more. On the other hand, Chaka attends the wedding and catches up with his cousins. At one point, his sister and her friend approach him and the three of them have a great time together. Needless to say, Chaka becomes love-struck by the girl standing in front of him. The girl, whose name is Supriya, joins him for a quick drink and then heads over to the dance floor. Now determined to introduce himself, Chaka follows his newfound love and starts dancing with her. Soon, the wedding ends and Chaka offers to drop Supriya home. The latter agrees to the offer and gets in the car. It's evident that both of them like each other but are too awkward to say anything. Meanwhile, Taran also finds a new love interest. While at the gym, he sees a really beautiful girl working out. As soon as he sees her, he fails at focusing on anything else. It's clear that he can't seem to get his eyes off of her. Moving forward, Taran stares at her for the longest time until the girl, Kusum, finally confronts him. After realizing that he's been caught, Taran quickly composes himself and makes up some excuse. However, Kusum sees right through him but decides to brush it off. Slowly but surely, the two start flirting and eventually plan to go on a date. Back home, Taran sees Chaka jumping around with joy. Confused, he asks Anshul as to what has happened and that's when Chaka excitedly tells his friends that he has finally found a girl. He proceeds to explain that Supriya gave him her number and is genuinely interested in him. When his friends hear this, they mock him for a short while before finally congratulating him. Chaka then goes on to say that Supriya is coming to their place in order to hang out with them. Just as the three are discussing Supriya, Anshul gets an anonymous call. Anxious, he picks it up only to realize that it's none other than the girl he met at the event. The girl, whose name happens to be Ruchika, flirts with Anshul for a short while before agreeing to go on a date. Since all three guys now have a love interest in their lives, they keenly look forward to a new chapter of their lives. Shortly after, Anshul and Taran leave the apartment while Chaka stays back to greet Supriya. As anticipated, the latter comes in and starts taking a small tour of the apartment. Meanwhile, Chaka just stares at her, now completely head over heels in love. Just as the two are about to start talking, the doorbell suddenly rings. Chaka immediately rushes to the door only to find out that Taran and Anshul have played a prank on him. In front of him stood a delivery boy with a large anniversary package in his hand. Chaka is initially confused and asks for the package to be sent back but the delivery boy refuses to do so. With no other option left, he timidly takes the parcel filled with roses, chocolate, wine and condoms and places it before Supriya. He then profusely apologizes to her on behalf of his friends. Thankfully, Supriya takes the prank lightly and starts chatting with Chaka. Everything goes smoothly and the two begin to get really close to one another. On the other hand, Anshul also goes on his date with Ruchika. Once there, the two instantly click and talk about almost anything and everything. Anshul uses several pickup lines and even cracks a couple of jokes in order to make Ruchika laugh. They both have a great time and eventually decide to get together. Meanwhile, Taran also plans to kickstart his romantic life with Kusum. That very day, he goes over to her place and strikes a conversation. Shortly after, the two begin to get closer. In order to impress Kusum, Taran starts dancing sensually and seduces her. Thankfully, his plan works and Kusum also starts dancing along. One thing leads to another and soon, the two end up making out. The following day, Taran, Anshul and Chaka all start talking about their newly budding love lives. While conversing, Chaka reveals to his friends that he has already been invited to meet Supriya's parents. He further goes on to say that if he somehow manages to impress her parents then they'll begin planning the wedding right away. When his friends learn about this, they wish him all the best and suggest he talk to his own parents as well. Chaka readily agrees to the suggestion. Shortly after, Kusum, who had spent the night with Taran, walks over to the boys and wishes them a good morning. She then kisses Taran passionately which makes both Anshul and Chaka very uncomfortable. The two try to leave but Kusum asks them to stay. After a while, she puts forward her wish to meet both Supriya and Ruchika. Seeing as it's not a bad idea, the boys decide to host a dinner party and invite their respective girlfriends. The scene now changes to Chaka entering Supriya's house. Needless to say, he's incredibly nervous to be meeting his potential in-laws. In order to make a good impression, he walks in slowly and immediately greets Supriya's mother. At that moment, Supriya also comes downstairs and asks Chaka to follow her. Once the two are completely alone, Supriya confesses that she has invited him only as a friend. She further adds that her parents are really strict, so she doesn't want to risk anything. It turns out that she wants Chaka to blend in with her family before revealing their relationship. This way, her family would not have a problem with their union in the future. After confessing about her entire plan, Supriya introduces Chaka to all her friends and family. Thankfully, the latter gets along with everyone present there and ends up having a great time. On the other hand, Anshul and Ruchika get closer than ever before. However, what Anshul didn't realize earlier is that his girlfriend is practically inseparable from her two best friends named Ruchai and Tina. The three hang out almost every single day and share every little detail with one another. Moving forward, when Anshul goes to pick Ruchika over in order to take her to the nail salon, Tina and Ruchai also tag along with them. Having no other option, Anshul drops the three off to the nail salon and picks them up later. However, even after getting what they want, the three continue to complain about anything and everything. At one point, Ruchai starts whining about losing her phone and orders Anshul to take her back to the nail salon. The latter tries to do so, but the three girls pester him relentlessly. They don't let him drive at all and almost cause an accident. Back at Supriya's house, Chaka introduces himself to both of her parents and somehow manages to make a good impression of himself. Before leaving, he bids everyone goodbye and gets in his car. Right at that moment, Supriya asks him to be patient and just trust the process. Love-struck, the latter does as told and soon drives away. The scene now changes back to Anshul, who seems to be having a very hard time handling Ruchika and her friends. In order to enjoy themselves, they all decide to go to a club. However, when they reach the place, things quickly take a turn for the worse. Ruchai and Tina end up getting wasted and trash the entire place. They cause major problems by getting on top of the tables, ruining the DJ's equipment and even messing with the bouncer. After witnessing all this, Anshul quickly comes to the realization that the girls are incredibly childish who can't take no for an answer. Unable to handle the three anymore, he somehow convinces them to exit the club. However, as soon as they walk out, Tina starts throwing a tantrum and demands that she drive Anshul's car. That latter tries to stop her while explaining that she's completely drunk, but the girls don't even bother listening to him. As expected, Tina ends up crashing and creating a huge mess. The next day, all three guys curse one another for being so weak in front of their girlfriend. Taran yells at Anshul for crashing the car while Chaka just mocks them from the side. Just then, the latter gets a call from Supriya saying she wants to go shopping. Unable to refuse, Chaka immediately walks out of his apartment and takes both Supriya and her mother shopping. That very night, Taran, Anshul, Chaka and their girlfriends all go to a restaurant for dinner. Sadly, the girls don't get along and end up taunting one another throughout the night. Supriya and Ruchika both get mad at Kusum for demeaning them and acting selfish. In the end, all three girls return home whilst being absolutely furious. Taran and Kusum also get into a fight as the latter keeps on including herself into his finances. Despite Taran saying that he can handle his own expenses, Kusum continues provoking him by saying that Anshul and Chaka are using him for his money. Later, all three guys check up on one another and decide to take things slow. Taran apologizes to his friends for Kusum's behavior while Anshul and Chaka also do the same. Just then, Anshul gets a call from Ruchika. However, he doesn't pick up and just plans to talk to her later. Unfortunately, Ruchika gets offended by this and texts Anshul saying she's done with him, and even goes on to add that she doesn't want to be with the guy who ignores her. Now panicking, Anshul rushes over to Ruchika's place and profusely apologizes to her. He spends the whole night begging for forgiveness, after which she finally starts speaking to him. Similarly, Taran also goes to Kusum and apologizes for being harsh on her. Thankfully, she forgives him and the two make up. On the other hand, Chaka begins to get annoyed as he has to help Supriya with almost everything, but despite this, he can't date her openly. As time goes on, all three girls use their boyfriends in their own way. Ruchika makes Anshul cater to all of her and her friends' needs, whereas Supriya makes Chaka do all of her household chores. At the same time, Kusum acts as if she hates favors but makes Taran buy her all sorts of expensive gifts. Slowly but surely, all three guys begin to get annoyed by their girlfriend's behavior. On one hand, Chaka begs Supriya to tell her parents about them, but the latter instantly refuses. She makes several excuses and continues to treat him as a friend. On the other hand, Anshul gets irritated by Ruchika's proximity to Ruchai and Tina. The three always make fun of him and demean him for absolutely no reason. Similarly, Kusum manipulates Taran by pretending to be completely independent while also making him buy her all kinds of luxury items. One day, while Anshul and Ruchika are just hanging out, Ruchai arrives at the scene. As soon as she enters the apartment, she begins instigating Ruchika and whines about how Anshul doesn't want to share any of his social media passwords with them. Enraged, Anshul glares at Ruchai while trying to calm his girlfriend down. The scene now changes to Chaka, who is at Supriya's house. While helping her parents with some chores, he comes to find out that they have already started searching for a suitable boy. It's evident that they want their daughter to get married soon. Needless to say, Chaka is devastated by this. Enraged and anxious, he quietly walks out of the house while Supriya begs for a chance to explain. Just as he's about to leave, she stops him and claims that she doesn't know what to do. She then goes on to say that she's extremely scared to stand up to her parents and tell them that she already has a boyfriend. This makes Chaka really annoyed, so he just drives away. Meanwhile, Taran goes to Kusum's place after a long day of work and tries to talk to her. However, the latter starts arguing with him by saying that he just doesn't spend enough time with her. Exhausted, Taran tries to explain himself, but Kusum goes on and on about how he looks down on her and treats her badly. After realizing that he has no other option, Taran simply hugs her and apologizes to her for being so busy. He then tries to explain by saying that his job is way too hectic and quitting right now isn't an option. Eventually, Kusum forgives him and the two spend the night together. Back at the apartment, Anshul gets a call early in the morning. Still sleepy, he picks up the call only to find out that Ruchika logged into his email and read all of the messages there, including the ones that his ex-girlfriend had sent. Worried, he immediately rushes over to her place and tries to explain his situation, but Ruchika doesn't even bother acknowledging him. Instead, she accuses him of still being attached to his ex. Anshul keeps on begging for forgiveness, but she just continues to blame him for things that happened years ago. After a long time, Anshul simply hugs Ruchika and talks about how she's the only one that he has ever loved. Thankfully, the latter calms down and finally forgives him. Meanwhile, Chaka and Supriya's relationship starts to topple over. While shopping, Supriya confesses to Chaka that she has started meeting several boys who want to marry her. When the latter hears this, he loses his control and asks her to do something about it. However, that's when Supriya claims that she has to agree to her parents, who are now adamant on getting her an arranged marriage. Frustrated, Chaka returns home and rants about his situation to Taran. The two continue talking for a while until Taran runs into a problem. While working, he comes to find out that all his credit cards have been maxed out. Just as they're discussing this, the door opens and a very solemn Anshul walks inside. When Taran and Chaka see Anshul's state, they immediately ask him what happened. In response, Anshul explains that his plans to spend the night with Ruchika had completely gone down the drain. It turns out that her best friend, Sunny, had been going through a really bad breakup. Because of this, she had decided to let him stay with her for emotional support. Moving forward, when Anshul tried to walk in, Ruchika stopped him and asked him to go back home as she didn't want Sunny to get upset by their romance. In the end, he had to leave quietly and return back to his apartment. After explaining everything, Anshul loses his temper and starts ranting about how some guys take advantage of girls by pretending to be their best friend. He goes on and on until Taran suddenly gets a call from Kusum. As soon as he picks up the call, Kusum starts talking about how she wants him to deposit a certain percentage of his salary into their joint account so that they can use it to make investments in the future. Unable to refuse, Taran agrees to the suggestion, knowing full well that all she wants to do is spend the money on her needs. A couple days later, while the two are hanging out, Taran expresses his desire to quit his job. He goes on to explain that if he continues working at a company, then he'll never be able to develop his own website. As soon as Kusum hears this, she starts panicking. It's evident that she doesn't want Taran to spend all his money on the website, as that would result in them cutting off all unnecessary expenses. However, despite this, Kusum pretends as if she's supportive of Taran's decision. On the other hand, things start to get complicated between Anshul and Ruchika. Now with Sunny getting in between them, the two argue a lot more than usual. Even though the two claim to be nothing more than just friends, Anshul hates the fact that Sunny controls everything in Ruchika's life. Additionally, even Ruchika does everything that Sunny wants and always acts way too touchy with him. The two cuddle and hug all the time, which doesn't sit right with Anshul. The next day, Anshul and Chaka go to a restaurant together. It turns out that they want to keep an eye on Supriya, who is busy talking to one of her suitors. At one point, Chaka even tries to intervene because he doesn't want the guy to marry Supriya. However, Anshul stops him just in time and assures him that Supriya will probably confess about her relationship. Sadly, things don't go as planned, as Supriya chats with the guy for a long time and eventually leaves the restaurant with him. This makes Chaka furious, while Anshul just laughs at the situation. Shortly after, Chaka calls Supriya and asks her about the guy. Initially, the latter just makes up some excuse, but then goes on to say that the guy, whose name is Pankaj, is actually a very successful man. She even calls him the ideal husband material, which further infuriates Chaka. He immediately hangs up and vents about his situation to his friends. Days pass by, but Chaka's situation doesn't get better. He spends day and night worried about Supriya, while the latter has no intention of ever telling parents about their relationship. In order to lighten the mood, all three boys decide to go on a vacation with their girlfriends. They all plan a trip and somehow convince the girls to spend some time with them. Soon after, the three couples travel to a beautiful destination and happily spend every passing second with one another. Now that they don't have to worry about anyone or anything, all six of them visit several beaches and have the time of their life. Things finally start to look up for them. Even the girls start to get along with each other and have a lot of fun. At one point, Taran finally tells Kusum that he has already submitted his resignation letter. He then goes on to add that he's planning to open his website as soon as possible. However, when Kusum hears this, she becomes furious and walks away. On the other hand, Chaka also notices Supriya's proximity to Pankaj. He gets really irritated at the fact that the two text each other every single day. Worried, Supriya tries to defend herself, but Chaka just storms away. Similarly, Anshul also comes to realize that Sunny is actually in love with Rachika. Because of this, he asks her to maintain her distance from Sunny. However, Rachika simply ignores him and continues talking to her supposed best friend. Now frustrated, all three guys start regretting ever coming to the vacation. In order to solve their problems, they split up and approach each other's girlfriends. Chaka goes to Rachika, Taran goes to Supriya, while Anshul goes to Kusum. The three try to defend one another, but after listening to the girlfriend's side, they return back and proceed to explain the situation to each other instead. Eventually, they blame themselves for their relationship problems, ultimately causing the situation to get even more complicated than before. Shortly after, the trip ends and all six of them return back to India. However, as soon as they land, things begin to take a turn for the worse. Just as Chaka is getting ready for the day, he gets a call from Supriya's father, Mr. Randhawa, asking to meet him. Excited, he instantly rushes to Supriya's house while thinking that they probably have found out about their relationship. Unfortunately, when Chaka arrives at the place, he realizes that he has actually been invited to meet Supriya's potential husband. Needless to say, he is devastated but still tries his hardest to stay quiet. Eventually, he storms out of the place while Supriya runs after him and tries to explain the situation. However, this time Chaka doesn't listen and just drives away. On the other hand, when Anshul goes to meet Rachika, he finds out that she and Sunny had slept together in the same bed. Enraged, he tries to talk to Rachika about it, but she just calls him insecure. Eventually, Sunny also includes himself in the argument, which further escalates the situation. Soon after, Anshul becomes furious and asks Rachika to respect their relationship. However, the latter just ignores him, ultimately causing him to storm out of the place. Meanwhile, Supriya finally musters up the courage to tell her parents about her relationship. Unfortunately, Mr. Randhawa instantly disapproves of Chaka and fixes her wedding with Pankaj instead. Later that day, Chaka lashes out at Supriya for waiting so long. Desperate and hurt, he begs for her to find a way, but deep down, even he knows that nothing can be changed. While sobbing, Supriya profusely apologizes to Chaka and confesses that she loves him more than anything. However, the latter just asks her to leave. The scene now changes to Taran, who appears to be working. After the massive fight that they had, he ignores all of Kusum's calls. But soon, all of his anger instantly changes into dread when Kusum texts him and says that she has missed her period. Now scared out of his wits, Taran rushes over to her place with a bunch of pregnancy tests. Thankfully, they all come back negative. However, instead of feeling relieved, Kusum starts fighting with Taran again. She accuses him of using her and then goes on to say that she actually wants to be a mother. Back at the boys' apartment, Taran, Anshul and Chaka all discuss their relationship problems. In a frustrated rant, Anshul complains about how they're nothing more than a walking ATM to their girlfriends. He then goes on to say that girls are absolutely unpredictable and controlling who just want a 24/7 servant in the form of a lover. Meanwhile, Taran and Chaka just stare at him in confusion while trying to calm him down. The next morning, Chaka wakes up to the doorbell ringing. He immediately runs and opens the door only to see Supriya standing in front of him. Confused, he doesn't say a word and simply lets her in. Once inside, Supriya confesses to Chaka that she's getting engaged soon. She continues on and says that immediately after the wedding, she will leave with her husband forever. While sobbing, she begs Chaka for forgiveness and tells him that she'll love him forever. She then claims that even though they can't be together forever, she wants to feel his touch for the last time. Needless to say, Chaka becomes emotional and the two end up making love. On the other hand, Taran slowly starts to realize that Kusum is extremely selfish and only wants to do good for herself. As soon as he starts talking about his developing website, she begins to argue with him and somehow accuses him of spending all his money on Anshul and Chaka. Frustrated, Taran asks Kusum to stop blaming her friends, but this just instigates her further. Soon enough, the two end up getting into a massive fight where Kusum accuses Taran of being selfish while the latter just asks for her support. Eventually, Kusum tells Taran that his business plan will go nowhere and he's simply on a path to destroy himself. This comment hurts Taran deeply, but he decides to stay quiet. The scene now shifts back to Anshul and Ruchika, who after their massive fight, had opted out of speaking to one another. However, after a couple of days, Ruchika begins to feel guilty and calls Anshul to explain the situation. While on call, she timidly explains that Sunny has already left her apartment and begs him to just come and meet her. Anshul does as told and goes to meet Ruchika, where the latter profusely apologizes. Thankfully, after a long while of talking, the two decide to let things go and start afresh. Shortly after, the two go to Ruchika's apartment and spend the night together. They have a great time and eventually fall asleep whilst cuddling with one another. However, when Anshul gets up to use the restroom, he notices texts from Sunny. Curious, he unlocks Ruchika's phone and reads all the messages between the two. Much to his dismay, he sees all of Ruchika's texts where she states that she misses him and wishes for him to be by her side. It's evident that the two are more than friends and are just seconds away from realizing their feelings for each other. Moving forward, Anshul, Taran and Chaka all come to terms with the fact that their relationships are nothing but draining. Despite trying everything, all they get in return are lies and insults. Having had enough, the three decide to stand up for themselves. After reading all the texts, Anshul goes back to Ruchika's apartment, determined to confront her. As soon as he enters the place, he asks her about the text messages. However, instead of clarifying anything, Ruchika just lashes out at him for checking her phone. She then goes on to accuse him of not trusting her and eventually demands that he leave. Now more furious than ever before, Anshul just storms out of the place. Shortly after, he returns back to the apartment. As soon as he enters the flat, Ruchika tries to explain herself. However, Anshul doesn't even bother acknowledging her. He simply grabs his phone that he had accidentally left there and returns back to his car. Once inside, he starts listening to all the voice recordings on his phone. It turns out that Anshul hasn't accidentally left his phone at Ruchika's apartment. He had deliberately hidden it in order to record all of Ruchika's conversations with her friends. When Anshul finally starts listening to the voice recordings, he realizes that Tina and Ruchai absolutely despise him. In the recording, the two talk about how much they hate him and even provoke Ruchika to break up with him. Furthermore, they ask her to start dating Sunny as it's evident that he is in love with her. After finding out the truth, Anshul drives back to his apartment and quietly eats his dinner. Just then, the doorbell rings and Taran goes to open the door. Surprisingly, Supriya walks in and tells Chaka that she's ready to marry him. It turns out that she has run away from home in order to elope with him. When Chaka learns about this, he becomes incredibly confused and tries to handle the situation. On the other hand, Taran and Anshul both appear to be drowning in their own problems. While the two are hanging out on the balcony, Anshul suddenly gets a call from Kusum. As soon as Taran sees this, he asks Anshul to pick up the call and put it on speaker. The latter does exactly as told and asks Kusum if everything is okay. However, before he can even say anything else, Kusum starts yelling at him for Taran's money. She then goes on to insult him endlessly before hanging up. This whole tantrum really infuriates Taran, ultimately causing him to walk out of the apartment. The very next morning, while Chaka and Supriya are sleeping, Mr. Randhawa shows up at their doorstep. As soon as Chaka opens the door, he gets nabbed by the police on false charges of kidnapping. It turns out that Mr. Randhawa had accused Chaka and his friends of forcibly keeping Supriya against her wishes. When asked about the situation, Supriya testifies against Chaka as she doesn't have guts to oppose her father. This quickly becomes the last straw for Chaka, who realizes that getting into trouble for such a girl is of no use. Enraged, he walks over to Mr. Randhawa and claims that he has no problem with Supriya marrying Pankaj. With that, he breaks up with Supriya and walks away, thereby encouraging his friends to do the same. Now motivated, Taran goes over to Kusum's place and breaks up with her. He closes all his joint accounts with her and calls her out for being such a manipulative gold digger. In the end, he storms out while striving to focus solely on his website. Meanwhile, Anshul also arrives at Ruchika's apartment and sits her down with Ruchai and Tina. He then plays all the voice recordings on his phone, which instantly changes the expressions on the girls' faces. Finally, he approaches Ruchika and says "I love you" for the last time before breaking up with her. Later that day, all three guys hang out at a club once again and finally acknowledge the fact that only a mother's love is true. The movie finally concludes with them enjoying each other's company while talking to their moms on the phone.